So, okay, mini review of absolute value. We're going to look at those top three that you've got on the top of your paper just to make sure we've got some of the basics down, and we're going to chat a little bit about the axis of symmetry. So, all the things that we do here are based off of this funky looking equation that we have for absolute value. Now, we're actually going to break this down at the start so we can see how it all kind of blends together, comes together. So on number one, for instance, I notice I do have a number inside, I do have a number outside. Those are my transformations or shifts. So here's how this works. Any value that's inside the absolute value, just a reminder, those are my left and right transformations, my left and right shifts. But because of the minus that's in here, it's the opposite of what I would think. This plus 2 is actually going to act like a minus 2. So pluses are going to be our left shift, and minuses are going to be our rightward shift. So this first one, this x plus 2 that's in the parentheses, actually means I'm going to be shifting left 2, and we'll actually do that here momentarily. The value outside at the end here, this guy, is always going to be what I'm doing as far as going up or down goes. Exactly. The down is my minus, the up is my plus. So if you were asked to write the shifts or the transformations of this particular equation, this is what you would write, left 2 and down 4. So what's that mean for my graph, though? Well, here's where this comes in slick, where I don't have to use a calculator. I start at the origin, and I just go the two transformations. I go left 2, down 4, put my point, my vertex, and that vertex in this case, since I went left 2, would be negative 2, and down 4 means my vertex is at negative 2, negative 4. Okay, didn't even have to bust out the calculator to look for symmetry, anything fancy like that. So you're like, okay, how do I finish it then? How do I get the V shape? Well, I need my A value. Well, wait a minute, there's no number in front of the absolute value. What number's there if I don't see one? 1. So my A value is 1 over 1. Or in other words, I go up 1 and over 1, both to the left and to the right. And I want to do that at least a couple of times, so I start to get this triangle or V shape, which is the outline of my graph. And then I just start at the vertex, connect the dots, and make my graph. Now, the one thing that we didn't talk a whole lot about yesterday was this thing called the axis of symmetry that showed up. And the axis of symmetry, we'll just call it axis here, is always going to be a mini equation. It's always going to be x equals, and the x equals value is always the x value of your vertex. You're like, okay, so what purpose does that serve? Well, if I were to draw it in, and I won't make you draw it in, but I just wanted to do it on this one so you can see how it works. If I drew the line x equals negative 2, this dotted line, and then I folded my paper along that line, I'd have symmetry. I'd have the same graph on both sides. It would look like one single line. So that's why we call it the axis of symmetry. It's my symmetry line. So x value of vertex, axis of symmetry, one and the same. And the only other thing really that can change throughout these is sometimes if my A value changes. Now, you don't have to do what I'm about to do here, but if some of you like consistency, you like everything to look the same, here's how I can make this look the same. If I don't see a value on the outside or maybe on the inside, like it is with this case, with my graph, I can put a 0 there. So, what is my shift this time, since there's only one? What? Yes, nice. There's no left or right shift, but I'm going down 3. So I start at the origin, and I go down 3 and I put my point. And then that tells me my vertex. I went left or right 0, so I put in 0 for the x value. But I went down 3 on the y-axis, so that's an easy way to get my vertex. But this time my a value changed up a little bit. My a is 2 over 1. Still positive, so I'm still going up, but now I'm going to go up 2 and over 1. Again, in both directions, otherwise you just end up with a line. That doesn't help us very much. Always should end up with that V or that triangle shape once I go up 2 and over 1 in each direction with these. And put that in. And if I was asked for my axis of symmetry, just like it was on the first one, whatever the x value of my vertex is determines my axis. So really when we see something like this on a quiz, a lot of these things are going to go right together and give you a lot of easy points, hopefully. All right, last one before we break things down a little more here. All right, I want to talk a whole lot less on this one. So on number 3, what are my 2 shifts? What are my 2 transformations? Okay, but what directions?
Left.
Right 1, because again, when it's inside, it's the opposite of what I would think. But then we nailed the second one here. So, right 1, up 2. So what point's my vertex at? What's the coordinates of that point right there? 1, 2. So I went right 1 and up 2. Now we're getting somewhere. What's my a value this time? What's my slope? -3. -3 over 1, which means what direction are we going to be going? Down. So down 3 and over 1. Down 3 and over 1. And we do it one more time just to make sure. So anytime your a value is negative, your V shape, your graph should be opening down. If it's positive, we're opening up. And again, my axis is just the x value of my vertex. Okay? So, again, this is a note sheet of sorts. So this isn't something that would come in on the homework check, but it does let me get that stuff situated. Your job with this is going to be in the worksheet packet that came with our stacked group up front. Now, notice we're going to graph them. We're going to find the vertex. We're going to write down the axis. And we're going to name the shifts. Just basically what we just did on here is exactly what you're going to do on yours. Tell me the shifts, tell me the vertex, graph it, woo, we're set. But I want to make sure we've got this down because this has a direct application to about 3 other things we're going to be graphing in the next month or so here. So if you understand this shift thing, life is going to be simple. It has the capability, at least, of being simple. We'll see how this goes. Now, you're like, what's the other sheet then? Because we've got one other thing that's going on here. Okay. This one also is going to be something that we're doing that'll go in the next homework check. So here's how this works. Tomorrow, we start the Algebra 2 F word. We start factoring. So how does this work, or where does it come from? There's a building that I like to do to it, and here's how this works. The pattern you're not going to have to worry about because I actually told you right up above here. What 2 numbers multiply to get the number on top, and this should say bottom, I apologize. and add to get the bottom value. So in other words, normally these two spots would be blank. And you'd be trying to figure out what multiplies to get 20 and what adds to get 12. Now, if multiplying is not one of your strengths, at least off the top of your head, this may be one of those things where you just have no idea. And if the numbers weren't there, you'd be like, I don't know. Where you might have to bust out the calculator, and here's what I tell people to do. Take the number and start dividing by small numbers. And if it goes in clean, you write both numbers. If it doesn't go in clean, you just leave that one alone. And basically what you'll do is you'll start making yourself a list until you find one. Hey, they multiply to 20, but add to 12. Ooh, which of these numbers add to 12? Oh, these two do. And you can put those in and be done. It takes a little more practice, but as you do it, you'll get better at your multiplication facts if you're not already. Again, here, negative times a positive is a negative. I owe my friend $3, I pay him back 2, now I only owe him 1. So as we start to do some of these, now I'm nice on the first couple. Some number times 4 is 20, and some number plus 4 is 9. What's my mystery number? 5. I'm not nice like that forever on them, though. So I start rolling along a little bit, and all of a sudden, I don't give you either of the side numbers anymore. So again, my job here, multiply to get the number on top, add to get the number on the bottom. But I want to give you a couple of hints. Now, I've written them on the sideboard. I'm also going to get them up here on the screen a little bit, but they'll be up on the sideboard as we go. If dealing with signs is an issue for you, and it is sometimes, there's a few hints that can make life easier on you. For instance, I'm multiplying to get a positive. Okay, that means that either both the signs I'm going to use are positive or both of them are going to be negative. So I look at the number on the bottom. Well, I want them to add to a negative. Okay, then both of these numbers have to be a negative. I know that before I ever start. So, what times what gets me to 12 but adds up to 7? 4 and 3. Negative times negative is positive. I owe my friend $4. I borrow 3 more. Now I get negative 7. Those two numbers have to do this. Okay? But again, there's always going to be little hints to try and help you. And this will pop back up in a second here with another one we're going to look at. This guy. Now again, maybe your strength isn't the multiplying. You start looking and you're like, okay, 28. And I know 28 and 1 because that always works. What else? And you start playing around with the calculator, and here's the list that you end up with. So you're like, okay, so what do I know? Well, I know since I'm multiplying to get a negative, one of the numbers has to be negative and one has to be positive. All right, I know that part. I also know something else. Well, how do I know when I get there how this is going to work? Well, if one's negative and one's positive, these two numbers have to subtract to get to 12. 28 minus 1, 12? No. 14 minus 2, 12? Ooh, yes. Okay, so I'm making progress. But then the last thing is, well, which one's which? Look at the sign of this, negative. That tells me the 14 is going to be the negative. It has to be bigger. Negative 14 times 2 is negative 28. I owe my friend $14. I pay him 2 back. Now I owe him 12. So once you start playing more and you start working with the hints, it will get easier. So again, you're like, okay, I'm making these cute little diamond things. I'm doing numbers. How exactly does that combine to factoring? Because I don't see any variables or anything. The last thing we're going to look at today, and again, we're going to hit this hard starting tomorrow. Okay, factor. Again, what two numbers multiply to get the value on the end and add to get the value in the middle with the variable? If you want to make them look like the other ones, we can do that. So my job here, again, becomes I need two numbers, multiply to 16, but add to 8. Well, I notice everything's positive, so I know my signs are positive. 4 and 4, because 4 plus 4 is 8. 4 times 4 is 16, but I'm not quite done. Factoring is when we make two sets of parentheses. Whatever your variable is, that's what I write down first. And then whatever values I got in the two sides of my diamond, if I wrote it out like this, are what go in the parentheses. Because if I were to FOIL this back out now, n times n is n squared, n times 4 is 4n, 4n, another 4n, there's 8. 4 times 4 is 16, and I can check to see that I'm doing this right. So on the bottom, again, end number, my multiply number goes up top. Middle number, my add number, goes on the bottom. And start thinking about the hints. Again, I look, multiplying to a positive, which means they're both positive or both negative. How do I know? Well, the add number's negative. These are both going to be negative. Okay, so if they're both negative, I need two numbers that multiply to 14 and add up to 9. And if I don't know, bust out the calculator. Ooh, those add up to 9. So it's -2 and -7. Oops, I'm using n when it says x. I guess it doesn't matter which variable I use. And then just copy down the signs with it. Okay, and you're actually factoring at this point. Again, we're going to hit this hard. We're going to spend several days kind of playing around with this. But you need to get that start today. Not mess around, not play on your phone, not talk about silly stuff and stuff like that. Actually get some of this done. Check the key. Make sure you're doing it right. So when I do start to get emails on, why is this struggle coming? I can say, well, because we're weak in this area, not because, well, we're sitting around poo-pooing around and working on, being a class late rather than now because we're not going to pass Algebra 2. Not the discussion I want to be having. Okay? So please try these out. Check them. If you're really getting stuck then, see me, work in a group with people, do what you got to do, but start practicing now, not later.